keep in mind when picking your containers is as above, so below. So when you have your plant, so we're going to be planting a tomatillo today. When I'm looking for my pot, I like to think of the end result for what my plant is going to look like when it's full grown. So the amount of space inside of the pot is going to dictate how large the plant is going to get. So in a pot this size, for example, if I end up leaving this plant in here, this plant is not going to get much bigger. Its canopy is not going to get much bigger than this pot itself. So the larger I want to plant to get, the larger the pot I want to be. So in this case, this is the size that we're going to be using today for my tomatillo plant, because it's going to get about that big around. So when it comes to choosing your soil, so the difference between potting soil and garden soil is that the garden soil, it's outside in your garden box. So there's going to be a lot of oxygen that's naturally going and flowing through your bed because it's on the earth itself. Whereas in a pot, there's not much space to breathe outside of this pot besides, the holes that you make. And also just in the substance itself, like how much air pockets do you have in the soil blend. So you want to make sure that you're getting a good potting mix as opposed to garden soil. And so the main difference is that potting mix is made up of, it's got some more breathable material like cocoa coir or perlite. So that's what we're actually going to be using today. So today I'm going to make my own potting blend out of regular garden soil. So this is going to be, thick soil. It's going to have, some manure in there. It's going to be really dense and full of nutrients. We're going to be using some perlite, which is basically like a spun glass. So this creates air pockets in the mix. It makes the soil nice and fluffy. And then lastly, we're going to be using some cocoa coir. So it's just basically just the husks of a coconut. Those particles just taken off and whipped together. So this itself, the cocoa coir and the perlite, don't have any nutrients inside of them. So that's the difference between your soil mix and these substrates. They're not going to have the nutrient content inside of it. So we need to be adding that as we go. So what I'm going to do is make about maybe equal parts or a little bit more garden soil. So what I'll do is I'll use this little pot here to measure. There's one of the cocoa coir, and one of the perlite. So the perlite that I'm using is larger sizes. Naturally in potting soil, you see the tiny little white pieces, but it's the same thing. So I'm going to go ahead and mix that up and just see what it looks like. So my end result is I want a really nice fluffy soil. So the more fluffy it is, the easier the water is going to be traveling through, the easier the roots are going to travel through, and the more oxygen it's going to be able to take up. So this is kind of what I have here. I'm not sure if you can see that clearly, but so what I'm going to do is put a little bit more of that. This time I'm going to do one of soil, one of my cocoa coir, actually two of my cocoa coir, two of my soil, let me get the second one, and then just one of the perlite. Mix it up. Now, like I said, this, the perlite and the cocoa coir don't have that nutrient base in there. the soil does. We're doing some more videos and teaching you how to make your own compost and make your own compost tea. So there's many ways that you can add nutrients into your pots, you know, as the plants are growing. So you don't really have to worry about, you know, the initial nutrient content that these plants are going to get, because we're going to be adding some stuff as you see. All right, so right now my pot is about this full of soil. So this is a good time to kind of assess. It's too early to put my pot in here. It depends on what plant you're potting, but generally with tomatoes, you're gonna see these little hairs on the stem, and the deeper that you plant those are actually gonna become roots. So you wanna plant them deeply. With tomatillos, it's not as important, but I'm still gonna plant it a little bit deeper. Depending on the plant, I actually have a little pepper in here as well. If I were to plant my pepper, I wanna keep the soil line as is. Generally, when you're potting your plants, you don't wanna bring that soil level much higher than it is in the beginning, because you don't really wanna rot that stem out. So I'm gonna go ahead and do it one more time. I'm gonna take 2, 2, 1. You know what? I'm going to double it up. I'm going to do 4, 4, 2. 3, 4. Pump up. Break this manure up, and then stay. All right. 1, 2. And you can generally find all these supplies at your local nursery, or even the hardware store. They sell big bricks of the coco coir that you add water and it expands. And it's pretty cheap. If you're gonna be making your own blend, it's generally gonna be cheaper than buying a bag of soil. All right, here's the next step. So I'm going to mix that up. Now, I know that there's a common question that people have as to what kind of container can I use, and does it have to have holes in the bottom? So when it comes to holes in the bottom, it really depends on whether your plant is going to be inside or outside. Generally, if I'm going to keep a plant outside, I like to have holes on the bottom, because if it rains and it floods your pot, that's really bad for your plant, because your roots are basically drowning in water. If I'm going to keep it inside or in an area that doesn't get, you know, affected by the rain, then it's fine. You just want to make sure that the soil dries out in between waterings. All right, so that's pretty good. I've got my soil level to where I want it. It might sink a little bit once I start adding water. So I'm probably gonna do one more round here. Actually, you know what? I'm gonna do it. All right. One, two. You're getting the authentic experience. 2, and then 1. All right, perfect. There we go. That's what we need. All right, mix it up. It's gonna look kind of like a nice brownie mix. The white stuff. All right, so this is perfect. So that ratio works great. It's not overloaded with the perlite. It's nice. It's super fluffy. It's easy for me to just dig right down there. that means the roots are going to be traveling through here very easily. And the roots have a lot of space to grow. So now I'm going to go ahead and put my plant in here. I'm going to squeeze the edges. I'm not going to put my pepper in here. I'm just going to take this tomatillo. So kind of rub it. Now, the root structure in here, depending on how long it's been in the pot, it might be root bound, it might be really tightly wound with the roots. What I like to do is kind of rip up the bottom. The roots are kind of like straws. And if they're all kind of wrapped up, it's kind of like a silly straw, right? So, or like a crazy straw. So the water is going to take longer to get up to the plant as opposed to a straight straw. So I like to kind of just take off the bottom layer so my roots are basically facing down, ready to take that water up. Now again, like I said, I want to plant it a little bit deeper than its original soil line. And it's really easy with this soil. I could just do it right with my hands. All right, and now we got this little plant in a big pot. So I like to take the opportunity and do any type of companion planting when I'm using a larger pot like this, just to use that space. The plant is going to get tall. It has all this, space underneath it to plant. So I like to plant low-growing herbs or something that I don't really want a ton of. So I have a garden, where I could grow these, but for example, parsley. I've got some parsley here. I don't really use that much parsley. So instead of, making a big amount in my garden space, taking a whole bunch of space, I'm just going to use the space that I have in here underneath my plant. Why not, right? There's space to grow. I'm going to be watering it. I'm going to be giving it everything that it needs. Might as well be efficient and use this pot. Right. And I'm also going to put some garlic chives. So garlic chives are awesome. They're just like regular chives, but they've got that garlic taste. So you would harvest them the same way that you would harvest your garlic chives. But the smell of the garlic acts as a repellent to pests. So this is kind of like a double bonus. Putting these garlic chives in here, they're going to use up that space. I'm going to be able to have them, grow and also protect this plant by just existing here together. Garlic is generally a really great barrier to put in your garden. I like to kind of make a perimeter of garlic, either garlic cloves that you can plant, or in this case, it's garlic chives in this pot. But if you saw our last video, I talked about garlic barrier, or maybe I didn't. Garlic is a great barrier for pests, for little caterpillars, and it's not a killer, it's a repellent. So I really, really like to use garlic. So like I said, if you just take your cloves and you can plant them kind of like a little perimeter, it actually helps to keep some rodents away as well. So like any kind of rabbits and mice. So I'm going to go ahead and just kind of fill this area with my chives here. All right, so I've got it all planted in. So now when it comes to watering my plant, if I'm going to set this up outside, I can just go ahead and, put it onto my irrigation that is connected to my garden. Or if you don't have a garden, container gardening is a great way to have a garden and make use of whatever space that you have. So when it comes to watering my container plants, I like to treat my containers like pets, right? So if you have, your dog at home, you're not going to feed it, 3 cups of dog food one day and then 10 cups the next day, and maybe at 8 in the morning, and then maybe 3 one day. It's going to be consistent. You're going to feed it the same amount every day, and usually generally at the same times. So that's exactly how I treat my plants as well. So what I like to do is you could always do kind of like a trial run. Choose an appropriate size cup. I generally go for like a quart size cup, like a yogurt container works great, or in this case, this is 32 ounces. And so, start with 1 cup, and fill it up. water your plant. If you're noticing that there's a lot of excess coming out from the bottom, you know that it's maybe a little bit too much. And then so choose the cup that you know that's going to be perfect. The plant, it fills up the pot, the plant absorbs it. You're going to want to let it dry out in between waters. You know, you don't want it to necessarily get bone dry, and it depends on what you are growing. But generally for our food crops, you don't want it to let it get bone dry. But if you let the soil dry out, it allows those air pockets to open up and allows the roots to breathe. That said, you don't want to water too late in the afternoon because once the sun goes down, the plants are not absorbing that water anymore. And then they're sleeping with wet feet is what we call them. The roots are wet, sitting in water, and that's how you can get root rot in your plants, in your container plants. So what I like to do is feed them the same amount, just like a pet, and at the same time, just like a pet. So if you feed your dog at 8 in the morning, feed your plant while you're at it. So I generally like to do an early morning watering and then kind of check on it again. So say I watered them at 8 a.m. I'm gonna check on it again around 3 p.m. and see how it looks. Maybe if it's completely dry, it's really hot outside, maybe I'm gonna do a second watering around or so. The idea is that, you know, it's gonna kind of take the day, absorb what it needs to, and then be fairly dry by the time the sun goes down. So that's really, really important for container gardening, is that consistent watering, that consistent feeding. And then the plant also, just like a pet, you know, it knows, it gets used to the watering time, so it knows what time it's gonna, you know, when the water's coming. And so it will be consistent as well. When you start changing the water for your plants, it can get stressed out. And that's when it can be vulnerable to pests or diseases or anything like that. So like I said, choose your cup. And so what I like to do when I plant, you know, when I start any kind of plant, I always like to put a little bit of Epsom salt. Epsom salt helps germination for seeds, but it also gives the plants a little boost of magnesium. And as it's kind of welcoming itself into this new space, I like to just give it a little boost. So you don't have to put a ton. Generally, for my plants, what I like to do is 1 to 2 tablespoons per plant. So in this case, I'm just going to kind of eye out. This is about 1 tablespoon. I'm going to just sprinkle it in and work it into the soil a bit. All right. So now I'm going to go ahead and water in my plants. I have made a brew of compost tea, which if you tune in to our Garden Farms page, our Facebook or Instagram, I'm going to be showing a video on how to make compost tea. But so I'm just going to water it in slowly. Again, I kind of want to see how long it takes to absorb this much water. So I'm going to kind of let it settle a little bit, and then I'm going to keep going. One thing about watering your plants, if you notice, I'm watering at the soil level. I'm not dumping it over my plants. One big mistake that people make with their plants is, especially in Vegas in the summer or high noon, it's really, the sun rays are really strong. And if you wet your plants, the wet leaves will attract the sunlight and it can actually burn the leaves. So you want to make sure that when you're watering your plants, you're watering right at the soil level. Also, with wet plants, you don't really want to touch wet plants. That's another thing too, is when the leaves are wet and we're touching them, the oils from our skin can actually trap on these little leaves. It's how they eat, right? Eat the sun. There's like little mouths on the leaves. So our oils can mess with that process and actually make them sick. So you don't really want to handle your plants when they're wet. That said, sometimes, for example, if I'm going to water them with a compost tea, or if you tuned into our last show, I talked about using coffee grounds and eggshells as fertilizers for your plants. You know, if you make a blend that you want to use as a foliar spray, that's really great to kind of douse your plants with nutrients so they can absorb that. Or if you're using like a spray, maybe a garlic spray to repel pests, anything that you're going to pour onto your plants, it's okay to do it, but you want to make sure that you do it when right around sunset. That way the sun is not shining directly on the plants and you have the longest amount of time before the sun hits that plant again. That especially goes for any kind of sprays if you're using soap or any kind of molasses or oils or anything in there. It's extra important. But so it looks like I'm going to use my quart method here and it's going to work great. So it might need a little bit of extra water because that was its initial watering. But now I'm going to, this is awesome because I can put this wherever I want, right? That's the nice thing about container gardening. Not like, well, I have to figure out where to put it in the garden bed because, you know, this kind of thing. This, I can move around. I could do whatever I want. If I want it to get full sun, I'll put it over there. You know, whatever I want. If maybe it's a plant that doesn't like the freeze and it's winter time, I could always take it inside. Container gardening has a lot of benefits. And so I love it. This is my first time that I've lived in a house that could have a garden. So before this, I always just had a little patio. You know, you can always go to your local Vons or Smith's or Albertsons and go to the bakery department and ask if they have any frosting buckets to donate. So they throw these away every single day. And so you can just go and ask if they have any, and they'll give you these buckets. They're food grade. They're perfect for planting. Like this is a perfect size pot. I could just take a drill and drill some holes and paint it, you know, bedazzle it, whatever. And it's a great pot. These, like I said, I mean, it's any store you go to, they'll be happy to give them to you. And it's just literally going into the dumpster. So there you go. I think that's pretty much everything for container gardening. You know, again, one other method, actually really quick, if you are wondering how much to feed your plants, what you could do is if you have a tray, like a drip tray that's underneath your pot, and you're really curious to see how much is this plant actually taking in with water, you could always get your drip tray or a little bucket, you know, or a tray that holds water and pour some water into the bucket. Maybe I would try with 2 of these, pour it and see if it drinks it up from the bottom. And then that's how you can tell how much the plant is actually needing. And that's a really good method as well for indoor plants. So a lot of problems that indoor plants have is you get those little soil mats that start flying around everywhere. They lay their eggs right on the top of the soil line of your containers. So what you want to do in that case is you want to dry out that top inch or so, because that's where they're laying their eggs. That's where they're reproducing. As long as that's moist up there, you're gonna continue having them. So in that case, it's really important. I love to water my indoor plants always from the bottom up. And once I know how much they need, I can have my appropriate cup, just take it once a week or so and pour it in the tray, let it soak it up. And the top of your soil doesn't actually need to be wet because it's the roots that are taking up the water, right? So the water line doesn't have to go all the way up to the top because it's bypassing the roots. If it's right where the roots need it, they take it up. The top doesn't actually need to be moist. So that just allows more passage for oxygen to go through. So water monitoring for indoor plants especially is awesome. And that's a great way to figure out how much the plant needs. So you can always do that with your outside plants as well. All right, so that's it. If you have any questions, you can reach out to us at info@gardenfarms.net. You can reach us or follow us on Facebook or Instagram. We're at Garden Farms or Garden Farms Foundation. And yeah, thank you so much for watching. And